By far, the most important role at any table playing a TTRPG is the Game Master. They're the person who gets to adjudicate rules, facilitate fun, and most importantly, they're the person who puts on and runs the adventures that we as players just get to show up and play in. But learning how to become a Game Master obviously takes a long time and requires the reading of dozens of books in order to learn how to do properly, right? Well, not really, because that's what I want to talk about in this video, because as someone who has recently bought a lot of Game Master guides for numerous game systems, some of which were just kind of general Game Master guides that gave you some helpful tips and tricks, I've learned some things. Some of these books were tiny and the Game Master section was only a couple of pages long. Meanwhile, others are entire tomes of knowledge with chapters and chapters of rules that you need to know how to utilize and reference on the fly when running your game. But after reading all of these books, and especially after reading the new DMG for D&D 5e, I realized that they all basically say the exact same thing, minus of course all the game system specific rules. They all give a description of the Game Master and your role at the table, and what that means for facilitating fun, running an encounter, creating an adventure, and all that kind of stuff that makes you the Game Master. And recently I was perusing the TTRPG online space and found that a lot of people tend to only read or glance through their Game Master guidebook, if they even bought one, a couple of times when they first get it, and then past that they only maybe open it a couple of times every other month to reference an obscure rule or double check how suffocation rules work again and stuff like that. And after seeing all of this and even reading about some fairly popular D&D content creators who have openly admitted that they've never bought a Game Master guide before or don't read their Game Master guide very often, I began to really think about how important these books are to my own game sessions and how often I actually use them. But before we really dive into this topic, I suppose, I'm curious what your guys' experience has been like regarding Game Master guidebooks. Do you have multiple of them? Do you read them regularly? Have you even bought one before? What do you think about them? All that kind of stuff, let me know in the comments down below. Because, and this is why I want to hear what your guys' experience has been like, because for me at least, when I started hearing about D&D content creators and other people buying their GM guide and barely reading it or not buying their GM guide at all, I started thinking, okay, that's ridiculous, because after all, the GM guide has so much useful information and rules, and the Game Master has to know the book cover to cover because that's their duty as a Game Master. And you know what? Maybe that's not true. Because I began to think back to when I was first starting out GMing and what made my game sessions fun for me and my players, and I'm gonna be honest, none of what made my games fun were rules specifically found in any of the GM books that I had. It was the random rulings or encounters that I came up with on the fly for wacky situations my players found themselves in. And I don't know about you guys, but in all honesty, I'm the type of Game Master where if I think I can't find the official rule in the rule book in like 30 seconds to a minute, then I'm probably just gonna make a ruling and then move on, because I think that's more fun than me sitting here flipping through a rule book trying to find the official rule while all my players are staring at me, you know what I mean? And you might just think I'm a unique case, but I've met quite a few other Game Masters who have a similar style to me, or who just outright see the GM guide as useless, because for most popular game systems nowadays, you can just reference any rule or look up any magical item for free online. Not to mention that for a Game Master, being able to easily look up your rule on Google, Archives of Nethys, D&D Beyond, Demiplane, or the Compendium tab in Foundry or Roll20 is sometimes so much quicker than pulling out the book and flipping through the pages to try and find whatever obscure rule you're looking for. But obviously this doesn't work for every game system, because of course for smaller or newer game systems they're not always online and readily available with free rules. But for those game systems, normally they don't even split the rules into two books anyways. They just have one rule book that covers everything any player needs to know about the game, and they keep the GM section short and sweet like Shadow Dark's rulebook does, for example. So yes, you can probably get away with not buying the GM guide for popular game systems, but you would still want to buy them, right? Because after all, there's so much useful information in them, like how to be a Game Master, or how to run your game sessions, or how to make sure your players are having fun, right? Well, in my opinion, if you're starting out as a brand new Game Master, then yeah, you should buy your Game Master guide for your preferred game system so that we can kind of get an idea of what being a Game Master is like, and also understanding all the important rules and obscure rules that may be included in that book for your game system, because there are a lot of useful tips and tricks in those books that teach you how to run an adventure and create a campaign. And this is something that I was ecstatic to see that they added to the new Dungeon Master's Guide for D&D 5e 2024, because they actually added useful resources and examples to help people craft their own adventures and run homebrew campaigns, which is what everyone has wanted out of the DMG for years. But after you buy that first Game Master's Guide, you probably don't need to buy another one ever again, because after all, you already know how to run your game sessions, so why do you need to buy another one? unless of course you're trying out a new game system and you really want those game system specific rules that are only in that game system's Game Master Guide. Or you're like me and you have to buy the Game Master's Guide for every game system you ever touch because you have a problem that your bank account does not support. But anyways, like I said earlier, all these books basically say the exact same thing, and some of these books don't even explain how to be a game master very well. And in all honesty, I've found that some third-party books like The Return of the Lazy DM and The DM's Companion by Sly Flourish or The Secret Art of Game Mastery by the DM Layer do a much better job of explaining and teaching you how to be a game master than any other book from an official game system that I've read at least. So in my opinion, if you don't care about any of the obscure mechanics or items that may be in your Game Master Guide because you just want to learn how to be a good game master and all the tips and tricks associated with that, then go find a good third-party Game Master Guide that kind of focuses on that stuff, kind of like some of the ones that I mentioned. And if you don't want to buy a book period and want free options, hey, YouTube exists, and there are so many fantastic video series that go in depth and give you a step-by-step guide for creating adventures and being a good game master. And in all honesty, when I first started playing D&D back with 4th edition, I found that DMG to be pretty boring and a little confusing at times, so I just watched YouTube videos explaining the rules and teaching good habits for a GM, even though I had the physical book. But anyways, to answer the question, do you need a GM guide or is it even worth buying one? The short answer is yes, because I feel like they do teach you good things, but I feel like you only need one good one to really hammer home some of those core values and ideas, I guess, of being a game master. And then past that, you don't really need to buy another one ever again because they all just kind of say and repeat the same things that other GM guides do, you know what I mean? And like I mentioned earlier, it seems like more and more people are beginning to just forego buying the GM guide for their game system because they don't find it adds any more fun to their game sessions when they actually have it in their possession, or they just see it as useless because all the important rules for character creation and playing the game are generally not in the GM guide, they're in the player's guide, and that's only if the game designers decide to split the rules into 2 separate books. And I know that us as game masters tend to want to always buy all the core books for whatever game system we're currently playing because we want to have all those options available to us, and also perhaps we may feel like we have to buy the book that says Game Master on it because how can we call ourselves a game master if we don't even own the book that says Game Master Guide, you know what I mean? And let's be honest, all of these books should be considered optional because after all they are, and for what I understand, most game systems don't even require you to buy the Game Master's Guide because all of the main rules are in the player's guide, if they even have 2 books like I was saying earlier. But what I've learned after reading through all of these Game Master guides is that there's only a couple of like game system specific rules in them, and then for the most part the rest of it is just all stuff you've read before on how to be a game master, just worded slightly differently. And unless you're like me and are addicted to buying cool fantasy books with awesome cover art, then you probably don't need another one once you already have one. But anyways, that's my take on why most GM guides boil down to the same core advice and why you really only need one, if any. Because when it comes to running an unforgettable game, it's generally not the books about crafting the perfect adventure that bring the most excitement to the table during a game session, it's the ones packed with cool spells, thrilling character options, and the tools that let your players unleash their creativity. And while GM guidebooks can definitely teach you to create storylines to help your players immerse themselves in the world of your creation, I would argue that they're not necessary. But as always, let me know what you guys think. So with that, thank you so much for watching the video, and if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing perhaps. But as always, I hope to see you in the next video. Take it easy. Bye-bye.